Hello, and thank you for this chance to describe the work that the Committee on Consumer Policy, or the CCP, has done on the subject of behavioral insights. The CCP has actually been doing work in this area for almost 20 years, since 2005. Since then, we've seen consumer policymakers draw more and more on behavioral insights to design more effective policies. And we've increasingly used the broad term behavioral insights to cover not only behavioral and information economics, but also the related insights from psychology, neuroscience, and other disciplines, as well as the related empirical work. In concrete terms, this means taking into account consumers' observed behavioral biases. This can include a default bias, for example, a tendency to stick to the default option, or information overload, where too much information taking too much time to process can hamper consumers' ability to make good decisions. Think, for example, of the time you don't spend reading terms and conditions when making a purchase online. In 2010, the CCP issued the OECD Consumer Policy Toolkit, which explored in some detail the benefits of drawing on behavioral insights in developing and implementing consumer policies. And then in 2016, the committee revised the OECD Consumer Protection and E-commerce recommendation to expressly recognize the importance of taking into account both behavioral insights and the related empirical work. The CCP also did a survey of government authorities, and based on that survey, released a report in 2017 that presented over 100 case studies of how behavioral insights have been used by governments and other organizations around the world in their consumer policymaking and enforcement. Finally, the OECD's 2020 recommendation on consumer product safety calls on governments to take into account behavioral insights to improve consumer policy decision-making. The committee's work, then, has provided a solid foundation for consumer authorities to use behavioral experiments and surveys in their work. Thus, they've tested the effects on consumers of certain business practices. They've tested the effects on consumers of certain regulatory or policy interventions. A particular area of our focus in the CCP has been to look at the effectiveness of online disclosures in empowering consumers with better transparency and comparability, which hopefully would also foster competition benefiting consumers. Indeed, businesses, knowing that consumers reasonably can process only limited information, sometimes have incentives to complicate or obfuscate information. So encouraging or requiring disclosure of key information has very frequently been used as a policy tool. And the application of behavioral insight theories to consumer disclosures is something we've outlined in guidance issued in 2018. At the same time, our work has shown that there are limits to what disclosures can achieve. That depends on their substance, their form, the context in which they're delivered. In 2019 and 2020, the CCP conducted a lab experiment in Ireland and then in Chile to test the effectiveness of online disclosures on the topic of personalized pricing. And that's a topic you may remember the Consumer and Competition Committees addressed in a joint session. The experiment showed that the tested disclosures didn't have a significant impact on consumer behavior. And indeed, although they were designed to be very prominent, most consumers didn't even remember them. We'll soon release a background report drawing on the empirical literature that looks more generally at the key factors determining online disclosure effectiveness. And this report will include a comparative analysis in the areas of product safety recall notices, class action notices, and data breach notifications. We've also been pursuing in parallel a project on dark commercial patterns. Dark commercial patterns, among other things, involve business uses of online choice architecture to exploit consumer biases. The common examples include user interfaces with false scarcity clues, only 5 left, or countdown timers, only 7 minutes, that obscure the final costs of a purchase or that trick a consumer into signing up to a subscription or giving up their data. And such practices can, of course, result in direct consumer harm, most obviously financial loss and privacy harms. They may also cause structural detriment or harm to consumers collectively, as well as having an effect on consumer trust and engagement in the market. One concern is that firms using dark patterns may be able to extract more sales, such as through drip pricing or hidden costs, or may be able to extract more personal data, as through privacy-intrusive defaults. In this situation, the firm would be obtaining a competitive advantage without offering better quality goods or services over firms that don't use these techniques. Another concern is that some dominant firms might be able to use those dark patterns, for example, default preselections or drip pricing, as tools to hinder switching, service cancellation, or price comparison, and thereby further maintain their market power. Other dark patterns, such as hidden subscriptions and obstacles to subscription cancellations, may more concretely lock consumers into existing services. Over time, the concern is that competitive pressures may lead to a market in which firms compete more with these techniques and less on the price and quality of their offerings. The CCP held a roundtable on dark patterns in 2020 and will soon publish a detailed report on that topic. Next year, we will also launch empirical work in this area, which may involve a behavioral experiment or a consumer survey. The challenges I've noted on online disclosures and dark patterns illustrate some of the ways that behavioral insights raise interrelated consumer and competition concerns. So the CCP would be pleased to jointly host a workshop with the Competition Committee next year on this topic. We look forward to hearing thoughts from Competition Committee delegates on how to focus such a discussion and to further planning on this work by the Secretariat staff. And with that, thank you for listening.